Hello and welcome to another utility precast training video. In this video we will be focusing on cast unit drawings. Let's jump right in. Alright, here we are back in the model. There's a couple things we want to jump into first. The first thing I want to show is the rebar settings here. So let's come to our little hamburger button, settings, options, and then rebar set. Now this section here is very important before we get into drawings. It's going to dictate how your rebar is rounded. So these three fields here are extremely important for how your team orders and details out your rebar. You can round up or down to the nearest. You can just change this dialog box here. Now what's very important to note is if you're rounding up and you're holding, let's say, 1.5 inch cover, there is a potential that you will violate your cover by going up. So if that's an issue, or if cover's extremely tight, you want to make sure that you're going down and rounding that bar off to that nearest inch. So just kind of keep that in mind and kind of keep that in the back of your head when detailing out this bar. That's the first thing. The second thing is we're going to be doing a cast unit drawing of this piece right here, but we don't have any of our lifters in there. So just for the sake of this presentation and for the drawings, I'm going to copy these over. But first thing, I'm going to hold Control and single select on all of our lifters. And I'm going to right click, come to the assembly, add as a sub-assembly. And I'm going to single click on my piece. It'll take a second and then the piece will turn pink. This lets me know that these items have been added to the cast unit. To check that, we can single click, right click, inquire, and come to the cast unit. And now we'll see we've got 2 of these side lifters and we've got 4 of these top lifters have now been added to the cast unit. If you do not do this step, these will not show up in your cast unit drawings. Tekla does not know to associate these items with the piece until you add them to the piece. Now that they have been added to the piece, though, we can single click while holding Control and right click, copy special to another object. I'm going to select on the host and then select where I want them to go. Now that these have been added to the cast unit, when I copy special to another object, I don't have to redo that process. Tekla is intelligent enough and knows that now these items belong here. And to prove that, we can come to the cast unit. Not only can we see all of the bar information, but now we can see some of the subassembly items, such as these 6 lifters that we have here. So now with that established, now let's go ahead and create the drawing. So to do that, first thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to have to run your numbering just by simply coming up here to perform numbering and number modified objects. Next, we're going to come to the drawing properties and we're going to come to the cast unit drawing, and we're going to load in up here in the top left, we're going to load in the beam settings. Press apply, OK to close. Now you can single select on your culvert with your white Christmas tree, select components, right click, create drawings, and cast unit drawing. If done correctly, down in the bottom here you should see one drawing created successfully. Come up to the top to the document manager and open up your new drawing. Alright, so at first glance we have a lot going on. Basically what we're going to do for simplicity's sake is we're going to create one drawing that just has our rebar. And then we're going to create, and in particular we're going to just do the outer mat. That's going to be on one sheet. Then the second sheet we're going to have just the shape, boundary, geometry of the piece. So to start off here, before we get going, let's actually close out of the drawing and let's do one last thing in the model here. So to create our outer mat drawing, we need to disseminate these bars from the inner mat bars. So to do that, we're going to single click on our bars and come here to the properties cog, and I named mine outer mat. So what was here previously was rebar. You're going to rename it outer mat, and you're going to also do that for your long bars also. So these long bars, these guys on all of your sides. So your whole outer mat should say outer mat, and your inner mat is just going to say rebar. So if I single click on the inner mat bar, you'll notice that it says rebar. The reason behind that is when we get into the cast unit drawings, what we're going to do is we're going to create a filter that filters out everything that doesn't say outer mat on there. And that will allow us to create just an outer mat drawing sheet. So let's jump back into the drawing. Okay, here we are. The default settings of Tekla out of the box will do its best to create these views, place them, dimension them. You may or may not use these settings. You may or may not use every dimension on here, and that's okay. This is a starting point for us. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take what we have here, and then we're going to kind of develop it, being that first sheet being the shape geometry, and then the second sheet being the reinforcing sheet. So starting off, what I'm going to go through here is I'm going to basically turn all of the reinforcing off in all of these views. So to do that, this view here already doesn't have reinforcing, so I'm going to double click on my boundary, come down to the reinforcing tab, and simply turn it to not visible. Press modify. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this dialog open and just double click on the next view. You'll see that everything updates here. Change it to not visible, modify. Double click on the next view, not visible, modify. Come to the side view, not visible, modify. And now I can come to my dimensioning tab and I can recreate all dimensions. So this process will kind of run through and kind of clean some of the things up. You'll also notice that my rebar bending chart at the top went away, and then also any and all reinforcing that was shown on the side has now gone away. Some of the marks have stayed behind, but that's okay. We can just highlight over all of them and press delete to kind of clean some of these up. These are welds. You can choose to show the welds or not. For the sake of this demonstration here, I'm just going to delete them. And any views that I may or may not need, I may just drag off to the side if I already have this view. Okay, I'm just going to clean. Oh, I don't need this view either. I'm going to bring this to the side as well. So here's my 3 views that I'm basically going to be working with. Delete this weld, 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 and weld. Okay, so here we are. We have basically just a default culvert shape drawing here, and just to kind of walk through the drawing to kind of showcase what we have with out-of-the-box settings. Over here on the top right, we have our bill of materials. This is parametric, linked back to the model, so anytime any items are added to the cast unit, they're automatically going to populate here. Down here we have all of our concrete properties, so our volume, area, weight, material density. And then down here on the bottom we have our project properties, so the product name, the project name. You can set up all of your stripping strength, mix designs, dates, checked by, and everything like that. Really quickly on this section here, let me show you where these items are stored. If I go back to the model, come up here to the hamburger, and then come to the project properties. When you start a project, this is going to be one of the first things that you want to do. You want to start off by filling in all of this information over here, because later on when you get to the drawings, all of that is automatically populated. Also, if you single click on your culvert that you're doing the piece ticket for, and you come to the user defined attributes down here, you'll also notice that there's a Precast parameters tab. This is where you can also control some deeper level settings that can show up on the drawing, such as your 28-day strength, your stripping strength, and your mix design. It's also important here to note that this does affect numbering, so which is what you would want if you have certain pieces that are 5,000 psi versus some pieces are 6,000 psi. Tekla will go through and analyze that and give the piece a different mark number. Likewise with the mix design, if you have multiple pieces that are 100% the same, they just need a different mix design, you can set that up here, and that will also show up on the drawings. Let's jump back into our drawing. Okay, so here are our 3 views that we have. It's also important to note, just like we did with the GA drawings, these view boundary boxes will show up as you hover over the piece. You can single click on them, and then you have to click on the gray to move and drag them. You cannot click on here, you cannot click on the piece. You have to click right on that gray line, click and drag to move them around. Okay, first thing that we'll touch on is the scale here. So likewise that we talked about with the GA drawings, you have to utilize the scale, and to get to the scale you can double select on the gray border and then come up here to the View Properties tab, and the scale is controlled through here. I will now show on the screen a screenshot of all of the applicable scales. So this is where you can control the scale and the label here. How this is set up is you can look at this diagram here, and this basically tells us what items we're changing. So basically right now we have an A1 which is displaying top, and then underneath it for this A2 field we have the scale. And to change this, you select these three dots. You'll see that Tekla is automatically defaulting to show the scale, but you can change these just by dragging them over. The view name, drawing name, whatever you like, you can drag them over and then just press modify. If you want to change the name of the view on the top, right now this view name is named top, but if you wanted to change that, you could change whatever element you want over here, or you can simply drag the text over and type blah blah, and then you can press modify, and now you see blah blah shown up there. You can also change all of these properties of the lines and the colors and the heights of everything all via the symbol section down here. Okay, next we're going to jump into some of the dimension settings. So you'll notice by default Tekla shows the overall in black, some of the lifters in this purplish brown color, the shape in the orange, and then when we get to the rebar you'll notice those will be in red. So to access any of these settings you can simply double click on them, and this brings up all of the dimension properties. It's broken up into general, appearance, marks, and tags. Starting off with the general, we'll just kind of run through these settings and kind of explain what some of these do. The very first tab that's stated straight can control how you want to dimension things, whether it's baseline, ordinate, chain, how you want them displayed. It kind of shows little picture diagrams to kind of match what your standards are. The next is the short extension line. So you notice by default Tekla wants to extend the line down to the point of where you're trying to dimension. Sometimes cutting through the piece. If that's not what you want, you can change this to say yes for the short extension line. You'll notice the extension line will get truncated as to not interfere with your piece. Next we have some of the formatting of the dimensions, such as the units, precision, format, grouping, and combining equal dimensions. When we get into some of the rebar we can maybe touch base on this, but basically the combined equal dimensions, you kind of have three options here. You can either have that turned on, so if you have 5 stirrups all at 12 inches on center, it's going to say 5 at 12, or you can say 5 at 12 equals 60 inches. So you kind of have that flexibility, or you can turn it off and just have it go 12 12 12 and have a dimension line in between all of those. So that's what we have here. Dimension line spacing and short dimensions here, you can choose whether or not to show the dimension inside or whether it kicks it, kicks this 5 out to the side. You can change that right there. And then the appearance. So this is where you can match your company's standard as to what you're used to seeing as far as text and height. To change the height of the text, you can just come in here, change it, and press modify. Notice it gets bigger. The font, you can come over here and just press the select. Choose from any of your standard Windows fonts. I'll change it to something crazy so you can see it change. You can also select whether it has a frame or not around it. And then this last section here, you can control what the end condition is for the line or arrow. You can choose an arrow, you can choose a circle. We've got a whole bunch of them here. An open-ended arrow, filled-in dot, you name it, it's in there. The marks is not used too frequently, but the biggest takeaway from this one, just from a high-level perspective, is sometimes, I don't have an example here, but sometimes if the spacing is kind of tight here, if it's a smaller dimension, Tekla will exaggerate the dimension up and over. You can just turn that to none to have no exaggeration and just have it be exactly how it's shown. And last but not least, we have the tags feature. So these right now are, for the overall, it's tagged with an overall in the E position. This is a little diagram showing you which each of these fields you can control. So in between the ticks, as obviously our 6 foot, and then you can control where this overall text is being displayed. Right now it's being displayed in this E field, which is up and to the right, which is what we see here. You can change any of these and add any of these settings kind of out of the box. You can just add regular text, or you can create your own custom template to call upon any data within the model. So that is dimensioning. Next, let's jump into revisions. So revisions are controlled from 2 different areas within the cast unit drawings. The first being, if you come to your document manager, single select on your drawing, and then right click and come to revision. You can create your revision, create your mark, choose who it's created by, checked by, approved. You can add a short description and then just press modify, and then you'll see Tekla here has a revision column that will automatically populate with that data. Within the drawing, you can come to your Annotations tab, and then you'll notice there is a revision mark here. You can add a revision mark. So let's say this overall changed. I can add my delta 1 there, and then we have, of course, your standard rev cloud that you can just draw around by clicking. So now this is rev clouded with your delta 1 tag, and if we go back to our document manager, you'll notice that now there is a revision 1 note here. So very nice, very easy way to keep track of things. With inside these delta 1 revision marks, you can keep track of all the different descriptions and who's doing what. You can cycle through, you can add a new revision, cycle through as many revisions as you'd like. And then you can also change the appearance of it, what type of tag you want, and the size of it, and the colors, and all of that good stuff. Okay, next let's jump into some of these views. If there's a view that's not automatically populated by Tekla settings, we can just cut it directly from the plan here. So if I come to my Views tab, I can create a section view. I already have a view coming this way, but let's say I wanted an additional view coming this way. So I select on my section view, I click my start point, my end point, and now Tekla's wanting me to draw a box around the elements that I want to show. And now pick insertion point. I'm just going to draw it off here to the side at first. And just like that, we have this view off here on the side. Now what I can do to kind of speed things along to make these views look similar, same size and whatnot, I can grab a view that I want to steal the properties from, like let's say the side view. I can double click on it. It'll open all of these properties. Now if I want 100% of these settings to transfer to here, I can just single click on this border and then just press modify. You have to be somewhat careful here because it is going to transfer all of those settings. So if there's some things that you didn't want or some naming that you didn't want, just kind of keep that in mind. And there we go, just like that. Now we have all of the same scaling and settings going on here. Now what you may or may not want is you'll notice that it automatically creates this section cut going through your piece. You can double select on this to control all of your different symbol properties, whether that be the name, the size of all of these lines and arrows. So what you can actually do is, if you do not need this section mark, you can change the symbol to none, and then you can just delete these fields out and press modify. Then your section symbol goes away, but you'll notice your section still stays there. So if this is a typical view that you would just say, side or elevation or whatever you would say here, then you can take away that section cut, but just know that you have the flexibility there to either show them or hide them. Moving right along with the views, similar to what we have shown in the GA drawings, let's create a detail view here. So I'm going to select my View tab and come to the Detail view. Let's say we wanted to do a blow up of the haunch here. I'm going to select my first point, basically the midpoint of my haunch, and then I'm going to select a second point to showcase all of what I want encompassed by the detail. I'm going to pick the label position, so just somewhere inside. And then now the last and final thing is to pick where I want this to go. So I'm just going to throw it right here. Now you'll notice that Tekla dropped in the detail right here. Now sometimes you may notice that when Tekla drops in a detail or a section cut, some of the line work may not be there. So to change that, we can double select on it, and we'll notice that the inner contours is turned off. So if we turn on the inner contours, we'll notice that now our culvert shape appears. Another thing that's very important to understand is our view extent here, this pinkish purple dashed line. you'll notice that I can single select on one of these handles and then click and drag it. But what's important about this is you'll notice that both of these boxes are moving. So I can either change up my view from the detail from the detail part, or I can come up here to where I actually cut the detail and I can hone in on certain areas. So you have that flexibility, and you'll notice as I'm making this view smaller and smaller, my view circle that is encompassing this detail is also shrinking. If I double select on this detail, you'll notice right now it's showing that the scale is 1/128, which is obviously very small. So I'm just going to make it bigger. I'll just copy one of these scales, maybe 1/32, blow it way up. And then I'm also going to turn the grid off to not visible. You may notice that sometimes when you apply settings from the view level, that will override some of your settings that you performed on the part level, and that's because of the drawing hierarchy. So just to get those drawing, or to get some of those lines to come back, just come double select on it and check your inner contours back on. And now what we can do is just come up here to our dimensioning and just add some small details here. I'll add a horizontal dimension, I'll add a vertical dimension, and maybe an annotation here. I'm just going to add a standard one with a leader line. Double select on the text and call out haunch. Maybe do a parametric one with a leader line here. It says that's a culvert. So very quickly, very easily, you can create these blow up views, whether it be of a keyway or a haunch or a specific detail that you need to blow up to get some greater detailed information for. Continuing on with dimensioning, similar to what we've done with the GA drawings, you can just some kind of basic tips on dimensioning. If I add in a vertical dimension here, and let's say I ended it for whatever reason, I can single select on the dimension and I can say add a dimension point, and then now I can just single click these in, and Tekla will continue on with the chain. Alright, Tekla by default will automatically show hidden lines where it should based upon where you've cut your views from. So if you've cut your views looking from the side of your object, and if there's some of those hidden lines on the inside, Tekla will default show those. If you do not see hidden lines for any reason, there could be a couple different reasons here. So if we double click on our view boundary here, and if we come to these view properties here, it's very important to understand this depth down and depth up. So basically what this depth down and depth up is doing is it's taking a slice through your culvert and it's showing you 7'6" up and 7'6" down. Anything that's shown within that view, anything that's shown within those dimensions there is going to be shown within this view. If you wanted to change that to kind of hone in on a certain area, you can do that here. Or if something's not showing up and you need to show more of your piece, you can change that from here as well. If you want to override these lines for whatever reason, you could change them on the part level. So you could double select on your culvert and you can come here to the appearance and you can change the hidden lines through here and press modify. So now they're solid. So a couple different options, a couple different ways to make sure that those hidden lines are showing up. Okay, I think that's going to basically wrap it up for the shape geometry portion of this video. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to close out of this drawing and we need to create our reinforcing drawing. So to do that, I'm going to come back to my document manager, single select on my drawing, right click, and then I'm going to copy to a new sheet. You'll notice what Tekla does is it creates a sheet 2, and you'll notice this little note over here that says drawing was cloned. So what I'm going to do, just so I can figure out which sheet is which, I'm going to come here to the Properties tab, single click on your drawing, right click Properties, and I'm going to change this to say Culvert Shape Drawing. Press Modify. Okay. And then for this one, I'm going to change this one to say Culvert Outer Matte Drawing. Tekla will bring up this little error message here saying the drawing has to first be updated because we just have cloned it. You can say yes for all. and then say OK. So now we're going to double select on this culvert outer mat drawing. You'll notice we're back here in the same familiar drawing that we've just created, but now what we're going to do is we're going to step through all of our views and we're going to turn on the reinforcing. So double select on our first view, come to the reinforcement, make sure that it's turned on to visible. If you notice, if your reinforcing is still not showing up, come to your filter tab here and we can delete out this row of filters. So just single click delete and then press modify. Notice all the bar pop up. Double select on your next view, come to reinforcing, turn to visible, press modify. You'll notice as I'm doing this now my reinforcing bar bend chart and my reinforcing straight bars over here is now populating. Double select on the next view and turn it to visible. Okay, now that we have all of our reinforcing on, what we need to do is we need to create a filter that is only showing the outer mat, because our goal here is to create one drawing here that is just showcasing the outer mat. So to do that, I'm going to zoom into this view here first, double select on the view. Now once this opens, I'm going to come to the filter category here, and I'm going to create a filter. So I'm going to click this tick box. I'm going to come down to reinforcing bar for the category. I'm going to say the name equals, and for the value field, I'm going to click this drop down and say select from drawing. Now you notice when I come back to the drawing here, now Tekla has the active crosshair. I'm going to zoom in and select on my outer mat here, and you'll notice that Tekla will automatically populate this field for the value, calling out outer mat. Now when I press modify here, you'll notice that Tekla will filter out all of the inner mat bars, because if you remember, those were just set to rebar. We renamed all of these bars to say outer mat. So now I'm going to do that same process. I'm going to come here to my next view, double select, click the tick box, select reinforcing bar name equals, but now I can just come here and click this drop down, and now this is kind of in the history here. I can just select outer mat and press modify, and the bars will hide away. And then last, from this top view, add a row. If you don't have one there, you can just click this add a row button, say reinforcing bar name equals outer mat, and press modify. Okay, there we go. So now we have kind of a cleaned up view for each of these three. I'm just going to kind of clean this up a little bit. We don't need a detail of the haunch. We have that shown on the shape drawing. I'm going to bring this view down. Bring this view down. I'm also going to get all these views to be in the same scale here. So it looks like this 1/48 is a pretty good scale. So I'm going to double select on this guy and change it to 1/48. Press modify. Come here to the top view. Do the same thing. Change this to 48. Press modify. Alright. Another kind of tip here. A lot of times you want to line these views up. So to do that, we can come right click and we can align vertically or align horizontally. So if I align horizontally and I come here to this outermost point, you'll notice it'll line it up this way. If we wanted it to move the opposite way, just move it back here. You could say align vertically, this point to this point. You notice that it'll align vertically. So you kind of have two options there for how you want to kind of make your drawings look nice and clean and have your views all corresponding. Okay, next thing we want to talk about is how Tekla sets up out-of-the-box settings for your reinforcing bill of materials. So the out-of-the-box settings will break your bar into two different charts. The first will be a bar bend schedule, so anything that is bent, whether it be L bars, U bars, stirrups, will populate up here within the bar bend schedule. It'll give you a quantity, a shape, the mark, and so on. It'll also show you the CRSI standard bend and fill in the appropriate values. Over here on the bill of materials, likewise that we saw with some of our embeds and anchors and whatnot, we will see all of our straight bars. So all of the straight bars that don't have any bends or anything will just populate here. And how Tekla out of the box names their bar is 4R stands for number 4 rebar, and then Tekla automatically gives it a 3-digit code here, so 010. This 3-digit code here, Tekla goes through during your numbering process, scans and analyzes all of the bars, and then gives it a unique code. And based upon that code here, we can see that this the description of this bar is a 5'4" number 4 bar. And over here in the quantity field, we can see that we have 50 of them. We know that that's the case because we've got them basically 1 foot on center. So we've got 10 on the top, 10 on the bottom, and we've got 15 on each side. So we've got 30, 40, 50 of those straight bars. Okay, next I'll showcase one of the annotations for the pull-out picture. So if you come to the annotations and you come to your associative note and you do with a leader line, I'm going to select on my L bar here in the corner and then come off here to the side. You'll notice the Tekla will by default automatically call out the bar number that it is. So here we go. Here's the 4R004. We can see this is a 17 shape bend. If I double select on this bar, I can remove the position tab and I can do a pull-out picture. Now once you add this over, this pull-out picture dialog box will pop up. We can come here and we can select which of these options we want. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to select all of them. Press OK and then press Modify. You'll now see that we have a nice pull-out picture showing, if you remember, this was a 4R004, so there's our 106.75 for our B leg and then our 70.5 for our C leg with a total length of 14.8 there. If I press Apply here, it will basically save these settings away for future callout. So if I press Apply, I can do OK to close. I can call upon this node again, and then now I can just keep clicking around here for all 4 of my corner bars. And the pull-out pictures will all be parametrically linked and all be with their respective bars here. So just like that, there's our 4 17 bends that we see here, the 02, 03, 04, and 05. When it comes to rebar dimensioning, I'll come to this view here and I'll kind of just delete away some of these to kind of clean things up. We don't need to dimension our lifters, and we can take away some of these welds. When it comes to dimensioning rebar, you'll notice that when you select on a bar group, it's going to highlight everything. It's going to highlight everything within that bar group. So I can single select on my bar group that I want to dimension, and I can right click, add mark, tag dimension mark. Tekla added this mark over here. Just drag it to the side. You'll notice that it'll go through, scan the piece, and all of the bars that are the same mark, it's going to go through and tag them. So I found 14 spaces of 12 inches on center for a total of 14 feet. And then over here on the side, it labels that there's a quantity of 15 of these bars here to make up that spacing. Now what's often needed is you need to close out this dimension string. You can't just leave a dimension string hanging there. So with your dimension string selected, right click and you're going to add a dimension point. Now you can either close this out to your cage here. If this is done in cage tie, some precasters will close it out to the end of the shape or to the cage, whichever you'd like here. For the sake of this demonstration, I'll do one side here to the end of the shape. You'll see that it added that 6-inch dimension there. For sake of argument here, I'll close this one out to the center line of this bar over here. So very easily, very quickly, you can close out your dimensions just by utilizing that add dimension point command. Another topic I wanted to touch on is some of these shop notes. Oftentimes you'll have a series of shop notes, kind of disclaimers to your production crew of different items, different tasks that need to be done, standard things such as maybe cover or solid zones, anything like that. So to add those, you're just going to come up here to your text and drop it in, and then you can type anything away. So you could say shop note, standard cover 1.5 inch. And then you can modify this. And if this was a note that you applied on every one of your drawings, you could do one of two things. You could save it away here. So you could save this as shop note, do a save as, or you could add it within your template. Actually within your border template, so every single border, every single drawing that you create will have that incorporated. You could save away all of these shop notes, just kind of a quick and easy way to access these. That way the next time you apply a text, you could double select on it, and then now you come to the drop down, you can select these shop notes, load it in, and then press modify. So that's a quick and easy way that you can store away all of those shop notes. You can also share these attributes amongst all of your other projects. So once you type out all of your notes one time, you can save that away to be used upon different models or different projects in the future. As we discussed previously with the dimension string, I'll showcase it here with the rebar. For the grouping here, you'll notice this is saying 14 at 12 inches on center equals 14 feet. If you don't want that 14 feet to show up, you just turn it to that. And then if you don't want grouping, you can switch it to that, and then you just get all of those 12 inches on center. So you've got kind of three options for how you want to combine equal dimensions into a single group. And one of the last things that I'll showcase here is if you don't have a standard shop note like this, and if you need to showcase the cover, what you can do is come to Dimensions. You can just grab a horizontal dimension here, and then middle mouse. And if you need to, Tekla by default will try to keep things, it's called protection, and it will try to keep items off of your shape. So I just pull this down here. You can double select on your dimension, and if you need to tag it with a string here, like CVR for cover or CLR clear, you can come here and position these wherever you'd like on your string, and just simply type in a text and then press modify. That way you can clearly and easily identify what it is that you're dimensioning to. I think that's going to wrap it up here for our cast unit drawing presentation. Hope you learned a thing or two. Thank you for watching.